Okay, so I know you all love action cameras, and today I'm going to be talking about the Insta360 ONE RS. Now the ONE RS is more of an evolution of the ONE R rather than a direct version 2 successor. What's great about it is that the core module is compatible with the existing ONE R modules and lens systems, and as well as that, if you already own a ONE R, you can in fact use the new 4K boost system and the new battery system with that camera, so you're not forced into buying an entirely new camera system. There are a few caveats. The new battery system, it contains 21% more power, which is great for battery life, but you will need to also buy the new case as well if you already own the ONE R camera. But apart from that, you know, this is a great way to be able to upgrade your camera in stages. For example, you might want the new core for the ONE RS, and that will go with all of your existing ONE R lens modules, and that will give you improved image quality across the board. Likewise, if you just wanted to get the new 4K boost module, you can do that if you own an existing ONE R. You're not forced into upgrading any one particular part. You can do it in stages, and I think this shows how good a modular camera like this can be when it comes to that inevitable upgrade cycle. Now the new case is better designed than the original ONE R case. This one opens from the side, and that means taking the camera out is a lot easier if you want to change over those lens modules. There's no more messing around. If you own the 1-inch module, you no longer have to unscrew that lens protector in order to swap over the lens modules. Now the case is supposed to come with built-in wind protection, and there is a little bit of a windshield in here, although I have found in my tests it doesn't really do a fantastic job at getting rid of wind noise. Okay, so this is a bit of a preliminary test just to see what the sound quality is like on the Insta360 ONE RS. This is with the vivid profile. Apparently it's got a wind filter on the sound, on the microphone should I say, so let's give that a test and see how well it picks me up. Now I have found that the door design on the side here for accessing the SD card slot, it is very finicky when you've got it inside this case, so I would like to see a bit of a redesign that on future iterations of this camera design. Another aspect that I perhaps would like to see more improvement on is the touchscreen on the back. Now it is quite small, and that's just a result of the modular design. However, it is a little bit unresponsive. I would like to see a new screen design with a much more responsive interface. I get a lot of false touches with it. When I'm trying to go through the menu system, I end up getting a bit frustrated because I'm clicking on the wrong thing by accident. So I would like to see some improvements to the responsiveness of this touchscreen. But having said that, the interface is clear and it is easy to use. Because of the size of it, some elements can be a little bit tricky to click on, but once you're set up, you're good to go and there's no problems. Battery life on the RS is really good. The original ONE R was very good as well, but this new one is even better, and when it's mounted inside this frame, you suffer pretty much no overheating issues at all. This thing will pretty much keep going until that battery is exhausted, so you've got no problems with overheating. That said, the modes such as 4K at 120 frames per second are not present here, so some of the more processor intensive modes that you find on other cameras like the GoPro are not here. However, it is very good quality. The picture quality on this, I found, has improved quite noticeably from the original ONE R, and the sharpness settings on it make a real difference. I've been filming most of the stuff with the sharpness set to 0. I prefer to do my sharpening in post, but I'm still seeing a nice, clear, sharp image without any of that horrible digital edge enhancement haloing that you see on the previous camera. This is really good to see, and I'm so glad that Insta360 has finally tackled this and done a good job of it. The One R had sharpness settings, but I didn't find they really made that much difference. On this one they do. Setting it to 0 is my recommendation. Insta360 recommended that I set it to medium. I found that too overly sharpened. So I've been using it with the sharpness set to 0, and that's the way I would recommend everybody else does it. You're not going to see a soft image. It looks great, particularly with the 4K boost lens. Another aspect that has improved hugely from the One R is the inbuilt stabilisation. You no longer have to go through the studio software or your phone app to be able to stabilise the footage. You can still do that if you want. If you're using an FPV drone, for example, the FPV FOV is only available if you use the post-production flow state option. However, for most people, you can just leave it on the inbuilt stabilisation and it does an exceptionally good job. This is really good in-camera stabilisation. And even better is that when you set the stabilisation from, say, low to high stabilisation, unlike other cameras, there is no cropping on the FOV. So your angle of view stays exactly the same no matter what level of stabilisation you've set it to. Again, this is a really good thing to see. The only thing I would say about it is that the angle of view on this camera with the 4K boost and the 1-inch module, they're not as wide as, say, a GoPro in super view mode. So for POV shots, I do find it's okay. It does the job. It does a really good picture, but it's probably not as wide as I would like to see it. So when I'm using the One RS for POV style shots, I prefer to use the 360 mod because you can get that wonderfully wide angle of view, and of course you can select your framing afterwards. I've had some great results using the 360 module for POV shots. You can get so creative with it in editing if that's your thing. So for POV shots, generally I would be tempted to go for the 360 module rather than the 4K boost. Now, still on the subject of the 4K boost, there's no 120 frame per second option in 4K. However, you can shoot at 100 frames per second in 2.7K. And I can tell you that the results are very good indeed. The 1-inch module still suffers that drop in resolution when you're using it in slow motion mode. I'm really glad to say that the 4K boost doesn't suffer that problem, and I've taken some really nice looking slow motion shots with it. It's still got the detail, and actually, you know, it will upscale incredibly well if you want a 4K output. So, you know, it's not all bad. You do have slow motion options there if you want them, and of course you can shoot 4K at up to 60 frames per second as well. Another great feature of the One RS is the active HDR mode. Now, this can only go up to 30 frames per second, so you can't do slow motion with it, but in high contrast scenarios, I found it works really, really well. It doesn't have an odd look to it, but it does capture a noticeably larger amount of dynamic range than the normal mode, and you can use it for fast action as well. I've used it on the 360 module and on the 4K boost module in high action scenarios, and it's caught up. There's been no problems with ghosting or any of those sorts of things going on. It produces a really nice result. For some people, the colour might be a little oversaturated for their liking, but for general straight out of the camera results, I found it gives a really, really good image. Now, speaking of the colours, Insta360 generally recommend using the vivid color setting, and again, that is probably going to be far too much saturation for a lot of people's purposes, particularly if you're going to be intercutting this with other cameras. So there is a log mode. It's all 8-bit recording, of course, so there are the limitations that you would expect with that, and there's also a standard mode as well. Strangely, when I've been using the vivid mode with the 360 module, and then I've been exporting the footage from the studio software, I've noticed that the saturation levels reduce quite significantly in the final video file. I haven't quite got to the bottom of this, and I'm working with 360 to see if I can find a resolution to it, because at the moment they can't seem to replicate my problem. It happens on Mac OS, so I think it must be something unique to that, but I will update you when I have found a solution to it. Now, just like the One R, I love the fact that you can change this over to be a different type of camera depending on the scenario that you're using it. I edited a video that I took on a river called the Terrarium the other day, and it was just me and this camera, and I used both the 4K boost module and the 360 module to get those shots, and I did it all on one battery. I did have a little bit of a booster charge from a battery pack halfway through the day, and that was just to make sure that I wasn't stuck on the middle of the river with the camera running out of battery. But the battery did really well throughout that day, and it was great to be able to select the module based upon what I wanted to do. So it's a real plus for a camera like this if you want to do multiple different scenarios. I mounted a pole mount on the grab handle of my boat, and it worked out really well. It means you can get such a variety of different shots throughout the day. You know, a lot of kayaking videos, they're mostly all head cam, and people don't tend to vary things because it's quite difficult. It's a bit of a pain on the river to swap over mounts, but I found with this it's worth it, and it's pretty easy to change things. Even if you just use the camera as a head cam in the 360 mode, you can do a lot with it to spice things up in the edit. So I really do love the idea of a 360 camera, and I still love using this in the 360 mode. And the fact that the picture quality has improved with the One RS over the One R makes it all the more desirable to use. I found that the One RS produces noticeably more detail on the 360 module than the previous camera. Its new core has better processing on it, the compression is better. You can see from the file sizes that the compression is slightly more mild using this new system than it was on the One RS, so you're not going to see the same compression artifacts that you did with that camera. And that was one of my reservations about the One R, particularly in the 360 module, but there's no such issue here. The only thing I'd like to see in the future is perhaps an 8K 360 module. I would love to have more ability to crop in on that 360 reframe. I can hope for it. We'll see what Insta360 come up with in the future. I'm sure they're working on it though. So would I recommend the One RS if you already own the One R? As I said before, you don't need to upgrade your entire camera. You can buy just the core module if you want to, and that will give you improved picture quality. So yes, I would definitely recommend it. The other question is whether I'd recommend it over some of the other options out there, most notably the GoPro Hero 10. Well, actually, this is a serious contender. The image quality is there. The interface on this is a little bit more finicky to use, but I don't think if you bought this, I don't think you would be disappointed in the image quality that you're getting from it. The only thing that I would say about it versus the GoPro is that with the standard modules, the FOV is a bit more limited for POV style shots. I prefer that wider view. So again, I would just reiterate that I would prefer to use a 360 module with this camera for POV than the standard lens mounts for it. And that's another way that GoPro, you have got that option of the max lens mod, which gives you a really wide angle of view. But as I say, if you're prepared to do the reframing afterwards, you can get wonderful POV shots using that 360 module. And of course, with the One RS, the battery life on it is really good too, and there's no overheating issues. So once you have this camera and say 2 batteries, I think you're good to go. I think you'll last most of the day. If you're doing a kayaking trip or a biking adventure, 2 batteries should be enough with this. And it's a great thing to see that Insta360 are really thinking about this. The one thing about the design of the One R and the One RS is that it does open opportunities for Insta360 to be able to increase the battery size as large as they would like, really. All they need to do is make a new case to house them. So there's really no limits to what Insta360 could do with the battery life on this if they wanted to do so. Now, another thing I should mention if you're doing water sports is that there's no built-in hydrophobic coating on these lenses. If you get the lens protectors, the sticky lens protectors for the 360 module, apparently they are hydrophobic. I've yet to try them. The only drawback with them is that because they're sticky, they warn against using them underwater. Now, I'm not sure if that means just a quick dunk in the water or whether they're just referring to diving. I'm going to buy a pair myself to try it just to see, because I really would like to solve the problem of water droplets on the 360 lens. I tried a coating, some Clear X, and it didn't really work, as you can see from the video that I took on the Terrarin. And when the camera is mounted on a pole, it's very difficult to access it to be able to do the old saliva job. I know that's pretty gross, but that's how we do it. So it would be nice to see a built-in hydrophobic coating on these lenses in the future. It would make water sports a lot more easy to deal with, particularly with the 360 lens, where lens droplets can be a real problem. So in conclusion, the One RS is a definite contender in the action camera market. You know, GoPro is most definitely the market leader, and it's the camera that everybody thinks of when it comes to action cameras. But DJI recently released their Action 2, and you can see my review of that camera in my videos below. But there are some limitations that I had with that particular camera which I didn't think were suited that well to general action sports use. The One RS, on the other hand, I think is a very credible alternative to GoPro. So it's well worth looking at if you're in the market for a new action camera, and even if you own the original 1R, the 4K boost module, or the new core is also worth looking at for that improved image quality.